Nathaniel Bandy. Striving for originality.
This Top 10 intro is brought to you by VectorStar Productions.
Oh boy, comments will be fun to read for this one. Let's talk about something real quick. All Kirby power-ups are useful in some form or another, even the one you all know that's number 1 on this list. This worst list is essentially talking about the power-ups that are the least useful, but not exactly useless. Again, no Kirby 64/Smash Bros. Abilities will be taken into consideration. Without further ado, let's go! Have you ever played a game where you played as a maid? Yeah, that's what I thought. Clean/Broom is an ability only featured in Kirby's Dream Land 3, and my god, is it bizarre. You possess the magical powers of a broomstick and can... sweep. That's literally your only attack, it's to sweep things. Now yes, the clouds of dust that come from sweeping can damage or kill an enemy, but does that really make it that practical? There's almost no range with the broom, which in turn makes it hard to hit anybody with unless you're right next to him. Now, this ability does reveal secrets in hard stars, and it's more useful with an animal friend, but the ability on its own isn't all that great. While this has nothing to do with the ability itself, who seriously wants to use a broom as an attack in a video game? If you ask me, that just reminds me of doing chores, and nobody likes doing chores. And here's where people might start complaining about my list. I'm sorry, but you're going to see abilities that you may like on here because there's really not any terrible ones that exist. Anyway, Parasol is a lot like a second-rate sword. The main attack is to swing it forward to attack enemies. The attack is strong enough, however I notice a lot of lag time before and after swinging the Parasol. You also have the ability of being Mary Poppins and floating from high heights. Why? I mean, duh, I get why it exists and even the top of the Parasol can protect Kirby from enemies, but how is this really useful? Kirby can already jump as many times as he wants. He can even control his speed of descent by mid-jumping at any time. The Parasol isn't exactly a bad ability, it just doesn't have much of a purpose if you ask me. It doesn't really grant Kirby with anything different or powerful, aside from his laggy swings. In newer games, the Parasol has more attacks, but at its core, it feels very mediocre. Number 8. Let's get something clear here. Freeze and Ice are two completely different abilities. Ice is a pretty good ability, but the newer games have combined Ice with Freeze. This list is covering more or less the older titles where Ice didn't exist yet. Freeze can allow you to make a snowstorm surrounding Kirby, and any enemies near it will freeze into an ice block. Once they're in an ice block, you can actually whack them off the screen. That's probably the only good thing about Freeze. The core ability, though, really lacks. The biggest issue is that Kirby can't move while using Freeze. What you end up doing is jumping towards an enemy, using Freeze while landing near it, then rinse and repeat. Doing this can work with small enemies, but it's very awkward to do for long periods of time. When you get to mini-bosses/bosses, Freeze is extremely hard to use if the boss moves around all over the place. It's very easy to get hit by something and lose Freeze because of that. If the Kirby game you're playing has Ice, you'll find that you'll barely use the Freeze ability added to it because it's just not that useful. Number 7. And here we have a newer ability, the stereotypical Western Whip. Your attack works just as you'd expect. You can swing your whip around and even latch onto enemies with it. You can also grab power-ups through walls, which can be useful sometimes. There's just something about Whip that I don't really care for. The range is decent and all, but it's not very powerful. I don't find it very fun to use. It feels kind of unintuitive based off of how Kirby works. Kirby moves very smoothly, while the Whip doesn't at all. It makes Kirby feel clunky and strict. Fans of Castlevania may love the Whip, and I love that series too, but it just doesn't work very well with Kirby games. Number 6. Canvas Curse is honestly a fun and different Kirby game. One of the exclusive abilities from the game is Balloon, and it doesn't live up to how underrated Canvas Curse is. With Balloon, Kirby can inflate and fill up with air. The more you tap him, the more fragile he becomes. If you tap Kirby enough times, he pops and the explosion will hurt nearby enemies. Now, in a game where you can only control Kirby through the power of lines drawn by yourself, It's already hard enough attacking enemies, let alone traversing the level. The balloon ability forces you to tap Kirby several times to kill enemies with an explosion, all while controlling his movement. This may be useful if you could control Kirby with buttons, but since you can't, it's very hard to use this. It's an ability made for the wrong game and suffers from it.
Number 5.
Oh boy, let's look at the ball. That's right folks, Kirby, who was already shaped like a ball, can turn into a ballier ball. Man, wouldn't it be great to have a basketball that looks exactly like this? If this exists in real life, hook me up y'all. Anyway, with a ball ability, you are completely invincible when flying through the air. The longer Kirby falls, the stronger his bounce will be. Sounds great, right? Well, here's the main issue. At any point in time that he isn't in the air, Kirby is vulnerable to anything. Also keep in mind that you must press the jump button to achieve invincibility. Falling from a ledge makes you a target for getting hit as well. Ball is very hard to control and honestly not that fun to use. The only good thing Ball has going for is the bosses in the game. His strength can knock them out in very few hits.
Number 4.
Needle is very similar to Freeze, so I'll try not to cover the same things twice. With Needle, Kirby transforms into a ball of deadly needles. Any enemies that touches one of the needles will instantly die. While this might sound great and all, the biggest issue, like Freeze, is that he can't move while he's using Needle. In Return to Dreamland, Needle slightly improves because dashing will turn Kirby into a spiky wheel for a brief second. Using the wheel attack just makes you want to use the actual wheel, because it lasts for as long as you want it to.
Number 3.
And here we have an ability similar to Freeze and Needle. Spark is pretty much the same thing as Needle. An orb of electricity surrounds Kirby, and any enemy that touches you will be killed instantly. Again, you can't move while using Spark, blah blah blah. The reason this is lower on the list is because Return to Dreamland tried to improve Spark, but not to the success that it did with Needle. You can make a lightning cloud that shoots lightning from the sky, but it's really hard to aim with, and it's overall not that useful. There's not much more for me to say that hasn't already been said. Spark just isn't very good.
Number 2.
Oh dear god, the mini ability. Isn't it strange how a lot of these abilities are only featured in one game? Mini has only ever been seen in Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, and it's extremely hard to obtain. Mustard Mountain is the easiest place to get a mini ability, and all that really happens is Kirby shrinks in size. This can allow him to navigate to smaller areas in which he couldn't before, but that's the only good thing about it. While mini, Kirby can't float, slide, dash, inhale, or use his cell phone to talk to other Kirbys for help. Kirby is incredibly vulnerable to anything that can hurt him because he can't fight back. It is only used to access secret areas. I hate abilities in games that have gimmicks like this. It makes Mini completely useless, and it's not even all that unique to begin with. Now, we all know that number 1 is, and now the number 1 worst Kirby copy ability is... If you've played a Kirby game, you know what the sleep ability does. You stop moving, lay down, and fall asleep. That's all that happens. In Squeak Squad, it is possible to gain some health from it, but does that really matter if any enemy in the game can just attack you? There's actually levels in some of the newer Kirby games where there's sleep copy pedestals that are only there to be used as obstacles. That's right, the game developers use the sleep ability as an anti-ability. It's your enemy and you don't want any business with it. I understand that sleep was created as nothing more than a joke, but that doesn't mean it still isn't the worst ability in Kirby, let alone one of the worst abilities in any platforming game ever. Which Kirby ability do you think is the worst? Let me know below. Like or dislike this video. Fans and trolls can unite by doing this. Hop on the bandwagon and follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and Tumblr to stay up to date for video projects and other announcements. Thanks a bunch for watching, and I hope you all get a nice full night of sleep tonight. Hey look, top 10 best Kirby copy abilities. You should definitely watch that after. And then maybe unique Captain Toad stages? Ooh, also look, a Let's Play of Mario Party 5. Oh my god, that is so freaking amazing. So yeah, this is an end card. And yes, subscribe if you haven't. Please, pretty please. You don't have to.